And a pleasant good evening, and welcome to Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Tom Heck, and with me is Mark Lathrop. Mark is, well, I'll call him a legendary referee because anytime you do over 20 years of anything, I think you're a legendary person, especially when you survive, and sometimes officials get beat up emotionally and sometimes, unfortunately, physically. Luckily, Mark hasn't been attacked at least too many times yet. He does a good job of managing crowd control in front of his house, as I kidded him earlier after a game the night before. But Mark is a longtime football referee. He's done a lot of Burroughs High School games. He's done a lot of playoff games in football. He's also a basketball official, and a very good one. Maybe looks more like a football guy, but does a really good job on the basketball floor. And he's also a softball official. He's coached softball. So there's really not a lot of sports that he can't do. And pretty much all year round, that's what Mark does. Goes from one sport to the other. And he has one of the most patient wives. We'd like to say hello to Rosie, who he's going to order 3 or 4 copies of the show tonight for your Christmas present, along with that new ring that he has for you. But it also is time-consuming. And the pay is okay, but none of the guys, most guys, aren't in it for the money. They're in it because they enjoy going out a couple times a week and blowing the whistle in whatever sport it is. So, Mark, welcome. I know you're a longtime resident of the IWV. Why don't you take us through your upbringing here in the area? I know you were a St. Anne's product, Burroughs High School, football star there, and take us through.
Well, thank you for the flattering words. I appreciate it very much. And yeah, born and raised in Ridgecrest. Like most, I was gone for a year or two, but came back home and was born here in 1964, believe it or not, and raised out on Brown Road, and started going to, I went to Inyo Kern School and then St. Anne's School, and my wife actually started going to St. Anne's School in the 5th grade. We started dating as freshmen, married my high school sweetheart. I went to Burroughs. My kids went to Burroughs. My mom graduated from Burroughs. So I've always enjoyed Ridgecrest, called it home, liked the town, and glad to be here.
Now, how many people that met their future wife their freshman year of high school are still together in a happy matrimony? So I give you credit for that.
Bless her heart.
I think that she's a give-and-take person, which I think if you're involved anywhere in sports, either one, man or the woman, I think that sometimes needs a lot of understanding, just that, because you come home maybe after a tough game or a tough week, and it can be, you know, pretty taxing on patience for everybody. But Mark, of all the sports that you do, and I know that you've already done a couple of Burroughs varsity games this year for football, what do you think is probably the toughest sport to do, where you maybe go home and say, you know what, it was just hard tonight for me to really get into a rhythm, really get a good angle? Is there a sport that maybe gives you more problems than another?
I think basketball is the most challenging sport, physically and mentally, because the pace, as you know, is rigorous and it's nonstop, and you're going all the time, and people don't realize that we make, even though you're not blowing your whistle, you probably make hundreds of calls, either no calls or pass calls or go ahead and make the call during a basketball game. So those decisions are rapid, so mentally you have to stay engaged, and you know, you have 2 individuals, maybe 3 if we get a 3-man mechanic game, but 2 individuals watching 10 people that are, the older I get, getting younger and faster, and the crowd is right there in the gym, and the coaches are right there on the benches, so you have kind of pressed in a little bit, and I think the pace causes us to stay engaged, which is a good thing, but it's the most taxing, you know, and on the bodies, you know, the hardwood, you know, beats you up a little bit the older you get, or if you're heavier, or if you're whatever else. But football, you can get some distance because you're out on the field and there's 5 guys, and if you have questions or concerns, you can come together. But in a basketball game, if you have a 20-second delay to talk to your partner, everybody in the world is looking at you and they're wanting you to make the call. So you know, I think it's the most challenging. A lot of fun, but the most challenging.
Is there any particular place or venue that might be more challenging or intimidating for an official. I know we don't have all that many schools in our service area. However, I know you've been to them all. But just offhand, is there any place, and that doesn't mean necessarily it's a bad place at all. It might be just because of the proximity of the fans to you, or just because of the noise factor, or even weather, or in Trona working on dirt on the football field, the pit there. Is there any place that just is unique? Let's put it that way, unique.
Well, I would, I think all the venues have, especially in our area, all the venues have a lot of character and their own kind of personality. Our local gym at Burroughs has been around an awful long time, and it's still the big Quonset hut style. And but if you go to a place like Lone Pine, it's wonderful, but the crowd is on the floor, and I don't know how many times we've backed into a guy carrying hot dogs from the snack bar, which is on the corner of the gym. So you got that going on, and kids and feet and cowboy boots, and you're running and jumping and stepping. And I think those kind of gyms, they add a certain flair to the game, and it doesn't take much to feel like you're in a really packed house. When they load them in there. I did a playoff game last year in Lone Pine, and actually Lone Pine had a very good team last year, and they have that real tall, big kid,
Brad Martin,
who's real good, and I think they'll be a force to be reckoned with as long as he's there. They're always competitive, but they were uniquely competitive last year. And there was a team from Los Angeles. It was a full house, and it certainly is entertaining when you're in that kind of deal. And there's some Hoosier-esque maybe kind of things where you have Big Pine with the raised platform, or your Bishop, which has a nicer gym now. In the old days they have the old stone gym. I don't know if you ever called in there, but it's very cave-like with an old dark maple floor. And so they all have, and Kern Valley, Kern Valley packs them in, and the fans are really supportive. Which I really like to see. You get a relatively small school and they pack it full of people, and it just adds an element of excitement. I like it. It's nice.
Well, hold that thought, and we'll come back and talk more with Mark Lathrop, one of the legendary officials in our area. This is Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Tom Heck, Mark Lathrop, Fritz Freiberg in the studio. We'll be back in a few minutes. And we're back, Ridgecrest Talk. Welcome on this Tuesday night. It's our sports theme tonight. I am Tom Heck, Mark Lathrop, and Fritz Freiberg back in our studio. Mark, let's talk a little bit about the playoff system. I know that every official in college and even in the professional sports want to be included in the playoffs to a certain extent. Now, I think at that level, it's probably a lot of extra contract money. In high school, it's not really much more money than a regular game. But how would you go about, is it by years of service pretty much? Let's take football, for example. I know you traveled a good deal. Are you allowed to do games in your own area, or do they usually send you somewhere? And is it based on how you were rated this past year, or usually by the years of experience that you've put in?
Well, I think it's a combination of all those things. You have, we meet and we go through our formal classroom study, and you're required to have so many hours. And then how you score on your testing to become varsity qualified. So that's kind of the basis. And then from there, it's going to be how you performed during the year, how you performed during the games, how you performed in the past. They can get input from coaches. You may cross over into a larger area and work with some other guys that would be the people responsible for evaluating if they're interested in and pushing you into the playoffs. So you get looked at in a lot of different ways. I think inherently, if you're at it for a long time and you are still striving to excel, then your experience is going to pay off and you'll be getting better and better. We don't want to get lackadaisical. Years of service is not a guarantee of playoff games. But if you're getting better and you have that experience, I think you're just capable of dealing with all the different things that come up in a playoff game. And you know, it's a real do or die for the schools at that point. They're going to, you know, somebody's going on to the next level and they're elated, and somebody is going home, and that's the end of their season. So you know, it's a pretty serious deal, and we want the guys to take it seriously. I think in Ridgecrest we're attached. Our particular chapter is the Mojave Desert Officials Association, and we are a chapter off of the Lancaster group, and so that's where our main hub is. And for better or for worse, a lot of the upper level playoff games come out of that area, but where we may have 15 officials during a basketball year, they have 65 officials, and they have, you know, we have a set of games, but they, you know, there's a lot bigger schools and faster pace, and I won't blame those guys for anything. I think they do a great job. I also have a chance to vote and elect the leadership we have, and they make the decisions of who moves on to the final rounds. I'll respect those decisions, and we always, I think, put qualified men and women on the floor. We are a little isolated out here, and that probably doesn't benefit us as a group moving on. We can do first-round playoffs historically in our own area, but then CIF would frown on, ideally they want you to have not seen the team you're going to see in a playoff game have over the year. That way you come in with a fresh slate, fresh set of eyes. Everybody gets to have a fair shot. You're not carrying any baggage with you. So if we send 3 teams to the playoffs, then we have a good chance of sending 3 groups of our officials out to areas. But as our teams, if there's 7 teams available in our area for playoffs and we're down to 2 in the next round, well then we're limited, because we would only send 2 groups somewhere else because they're going to send 2 guys from there here. So as that works out, you know, it's just because we're a smaller area and a smaller group, we have less opportunities, and I think it's fine enough and as fair as it could be.
And the other thing too, a lot of the schools in our area, our service area, so to say, for the MDOA, they're now moving to the central section, which basically they have to use central section officials. And the other stipulation for the new schools that move from the southern section, which Burroughs is in, to the central section is they have to play away games their first couple years. Right. So it's all going to be up towards the Bakersfield area, which we wouldn't get any of those games. So a lot of things. And speaking of the central section, I know Burroughs at one time they looked into maybe going into that central section. Example of the central section would be Tehachapi. They're probably one of the most southern teams. However, Bishop and Kern Valley high schools have switched over. I believe California City too now has switched over to the central section. So it seems like more and more team on the kind of the outskirts of our area, you know, are moving away, and I know that complicates things. I think Trona is also discussing possibly going to that central section. So for the good or for the bad, I think that, you know, maybe is a disadvantage in a way for, you know, our guys to, you know, get more opportunities, but perhaps for the schools a better deal there. What would you think if, you know, Burroughs went to the central?
Well, you know, it's the athletic directors and the principals and the administration are trying to make decisions which are advantageous to their players and their teams. Sometimes it's challenging for the smaller schools and the more rural areas to play the larger schools from, say, Palm Desert or Orange County or San Bernardino, the Inland Empire, where, you know, the number, when you match up, the numbers are greater. They have a lot of kids to choose from, so we work our tails off and then get a chance for the playoffs and end up going against some seeds that are very, very challenging. And I think that the central section with with those rural communities along the 99 corridor and out in there where you have the McFarlands and whatever smaller towns they are, or the smaller schools, I think it's probably more competitive for us, for the Kern Valleys and for the Bishops. And I don't know that it's a driving advantage because Bishop is far from everywhere and Mammoth is far, it's going to be, we're isolated location-wise and guys are going to have to drive. But I just think so many years they roll along at a good clip and then suddenly they get smoked by somebody, and it's just, as those teams thin down, it's harder for them to compete. And I think the Central section, that had to be a tough decision for them to make that change to go from Southern to Central. But perhaps it will give them a chance to be more competitive, go further on into the playoffs, and play teams more their caliber. They got good kids and quality kids, but sometimes you just can't match up with the talent pool.
Okay, Mark, when we come back, we're going to talk about maybe rule changes you've seen over the years in your tenure, and maybe some that you would maybe like to see put in also. We'll do that when we come back in just a few minutes. This is Ridgecrest Talk, live on Tuesday night. Mark Lathrop, Tom Heck, Fritz Freiberg, our director tonight. We'll see you in just a few minutes. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Live. I'm Tom Heck, Mark Lathrop. If you just tuned in, welcome on this Tuesday night. Director is Fritz Freiberg. Our technical guru is Keith back in the studio in the technical control room. He can pretty much put anything together and does a great job. I think after his tryout with the Grateful Dead, he didn't get that lead drum job. He became where he is now, so he does a great job. But Mark, let's go back to some of the rule changes now that have taken effect over the years, and your thoughts, just in all the sports generally. What have you seen as far as changes go? I know there's been a lot of pressure, especially for football, for trying to protect players, where they can hit, where they can hit, but just kind of expound on the years.
I think that the game has stayed fundamentally the same. I think all the games have stayed fundamentally the same. Basketball, very few changes. I was around before the three-point line, and so that was a nice change, and we great scoring opportunities, and changed the game and moved it outside. And
that was 1985. Well, then for college, it was 1985. I remember because I had just the last year that they didn't have the three-point line was the last year I played in college, and that would have made a difference.
And it seems like there's a trickle-down effect. We don't get as much from the pros, but as college goes, the high schools tend to go. Now there are some plays where the high schools are going to remain safer, I think, than college, and just because they're watching the kids, they're younger and what have you. But if you watch, Sunday doesn't necessarily reflect what happens on Saturday in the college games, but you'll see some changes migrate down, and then what happens in college will generally come to the high school level. And so although those rules are different, and we have guys that do multiple associations where they're in both, but you'll see those come to us. And I don't know that I would, it always seems to be for the good. As the equipment improved, the safety concerns improved, and that's a little bit of a quandary, because the equipment got better and safer and more protective, but then the speed of the game ramped up. Like football, you have these in the old days the helmets weren't that great, so you couldn't just throw your head in there like a missile, because you would have, you would bring pain onto yourself. So as the equipment got better, the guys could do more things with their body. Hit harder, go faster. So while you didn't feel the initial shock, guys were getting hurt. So then we had to balance that out with making the safety of the game more managed, I guess, by the officials, because the kids are going to go 100%. That's the way they're wired, and that's the way they should play. But we've really cranked it up with head injuries. I think in the last 5 years maybe has been a pretty serious topic, and so each year it's a point of emphasis. And then this year we actually have used the term targeting, in football. That made it down to the high school rules, and that was significant, where you were defenseless players or unnecessary roughness, unnecessary hits away from the play, all 15-yard penalties, possible ejections. In the old days, it was just a spear, which you saw so few of, but now, like you'll see in the pros, those $100,000 head hits in high school, that you're out of the game, and they're trying to protect the kids. Concussions, you know, concussions are the main thing, and brain injury, and we've had significant injuries in our area, and so I think they're trying to keep them safe, and I think that's where you see the most emphasis on rule changes and game changes, and you know, it's a good thing.
Now, in high school sports, if you are ejected from a game as a player or a coach, that means the very next game you are not eligible to play in that game or coach in that game, correct?
Correct, yeah. If you have if you get tossed out of a game at any of the high school venues, you're out for the remainder of that game and the following game, and after that we have to report that to our CIF liaison, and CIF takes that on. We don't, as officials, have to see who's eligible that week. We ask the coach who's eligible, they tell us they are, we think they're legal, and it's all good. But yeah, they wanted to make it where you were going to feel a significant, it would be a legitimate punishment to make the guys respect both safety and sportsmanship, because, you know, in all these sports, it's not just physical. We're teaching teamwork, and we're teaching camaraderie, and we're teaching good sportsmanship and helping each other up. And, you know, football is inherently violent, but it doesn't have to be an element of poor sportsmanship. You know, guys can, you know, tip your hat, may the best guy win, and I like those rules. In my pregame speeches year after year, we've talked about sportsmanship and player safety from the beginning to the end, regardless of the score. You know, there's certain times where you might let something go because it was insignificant, or it was way over here and the play was over there, or one team was losing so poorly we were just trying to keep them from being demoralized. But those safety things, a clip, a shot in the head, a fight, for heaven's sakes, you know, that is an automatic ejection. Whether or not you make contact, you take a swing, you'll probably be sitting that game and the next game, and you know, it's a good part of the game, and we're trying to teach them a lot. And the coaches, we would hope, are trying to teach them a lot about being better people, better young men and women, and using sports for all the right reasons.
You know, and is there any, besides being maybe a Dr. Laura and a psychologist, but is there any secret to trying to maybe cool down coaches that are getting out of control? Just, I know football can be taxing. I've watched you at work, and I thought you've done a good job, you know, maybe not singing Kumbaya with him as, you know, after the game, but calming things down. The same thing on the basketball court. I think you have a very good style there, and also on the softball field. Any secret you have, or has it just kind of been a learning lesson on maybe, I think this will work?
Well, you know, for me personally, I coached. I coached a lot of softball, and I coached some basketball, and I don't know that I would have liked to officiated myself, because I was an intense coach. So I think that gave me, maybe not unique, but certainly a different perspective, because first and foremost, I have a lot of respect for what the coaches are doing. You know, those guys, you would know. You know, the amount of hours that you put in as a coach is unbelievable. You know, we put in
our last 20 seconds or so, give us kind of maybe a key to your success doing that. I think you do a great job.
Listen, mutual respect, understand what they're trying to achieve, and just let it doesn't have to be confrontational. We're on the same side.
Mark, the time is just flowing by. You did a great job tonight. Appreciate all your insight. Appreciate everyone watching. This is Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Tom Heck, Mark Layup. We'll see you next Tuesday night.